2015, I did a thing. I did something that scared me, something that excited me, something that was unknown to me. In 2015, I published a book. That book was called Wrapped in Skin. And from that day, it has changed my life consistently. Almost daily, it has affected me. And my hope is that everyone who's picked the book up from that time has had some impact, been impacted in some way by the words on those pages. This is an opportunity for us to unpack those concepts, to really dive deep. You'll get a front row seat to hear me talk to people about what it is to live a life of purpose. What is existence? What is life itself? Why are we here? You'll get to ask your questions, have comments heard and talked about on the show. And maybe at some point, some of you will have an opportunity to come on and talk about your own personal experience and your own life's journey. My name is Justin Jamar Grooms, and I want to welcome you to Wrapped, the podcast. All right, what's going on? This is your boy Justin Jamar Grooms with another episode of the Wrapped in Skin podcast, back with season 3. This is episode 2. And I can't tell you how excited I am for this one because I told y'all that I was going to have some guests on this season. And I've had a couple of brave souls who said that they would, jump on with me and have some conversation. And this is the first one, and I'm extremely excited to have her on. It's exciting for me because it's somebody that I just recently met. And so I'm going to be exploring some topics with her and learning about her kind of as you all are learning about her. So it's not anybody I have a real long history with. So that's always exciting for me to meet new people and have conversations about the kind of stuff that we talk about on this podcast. Again, if you haven't checked out any of season 2, please go check out season 2. If you're new to this podcast, it's very important that you see where I started from and the kind of topics and conversations that I have. In season 1, if you want to go check out season 1, check that out. All 3 episodes, but some of those are worth listening to as well. But definitely check out season 2 and check out the last episode I just did called Magnum Opus. I think that'll bless you so much. So without further ado, I have a new friend of mine. Carol Hernandez is with me today to talk about all kinds of stuff. She don't really know what we're going to talk about.
No, I don't know.
So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
First of all, how are you? How's everything going? How's your week been so far?
I'm good. My week is good. Just workload on top of workload, but other than that, and motherhood. But week is good. Thank you.
That's good. Yeah, we're going to talk about all that. Motherhood, work, all that good stuff. So just a little background for us. We met maybe officially like 2 or 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, about 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah, so we go to the same church. We both go to Oasis, which is an incredible community. I can't even really call it a church. It's a community. It's really what drew me to Oasis was the idea of community and the ability to have these engaging conversations with people. Some like-minded, some not so much like-minded, but it doesn't feel like a traditional normal church. It's probably the most diverse congregation that I've been a part of for sure, but also probably in Los Angeles. Would you agree with that?
Well, I am new to church overall. So the last
Don't
time
give too much away. We got so much to talk about.
Look, there I go dumping. It is very diverse, so I do enjoy that. That is one of the first things that I noticed when I stepped in there. But I had not been to church since I was probably, 6. And the last church I went to was it's called Angela's Temple, which is in Echo Park, and it's I was going to the Spanish side due to that's where my dad he currently still goes there. But yes, I agree. It's diverse. Oasis, I've made great community. I could even call some people now like feels like family. And it's been one of the biggest blessings that I've come across in the last year. or so,
Hmm.
like almost a year. So I've been going for roughly 11 months. I think in March I have a year. I am counting. I am counting my time.
Yeah. No, I feel
So,
that. So,
yeah.
so Angela's Temple, I'm not from. I mean, I'm familiar with it. I haven't been, but I know a lot of people who go. There's a separate. You said a Spanish side.
Yeah, so they have two sides. There's a backside where actually Zoe Church just had like their weekend conference. That's the
Okay.
English side. Um or that's where they do their like younger English services. And the
Hmm.
front side they have it's strictly Spanish service. And that's, I don't know, they run service all morning, all afternoon there. I don't know. My dad
Got it.
goes at 11,
Got
doesn't
it.
come back until 3 or 4.
Yeah, that sounds like the church I was raised in. I was raised in a traditional Southern Baptist household. We Sunday school, church, some event after church, staying to
Yeah.
clean up after the event. So it was an all day thing for me too.
Yeah. It's
Um,
very, the memory for me going there is very, like, very blurred in the back of my brain. So
yeah,
my dad
yeah,
didn't force me and my mom didn't go. So there was no enforcement of religion growing up for me.
got it. So just to back up, so a lot of you, it may be some people who are new to this podcast, and inevitably, when I start talking about anything, the undertone or the undercurrent is always God. So people will say, you have a religious podcast. This podcast is not about church. It is not about church. Um, it is about purpose and living a life that is fulfilling. And so a lot of that does go back to my upbringing and church and community, but this is not a religious podcast. I don't really care what religion you are. um, so I just want to get that out of the way, because if you're new, you might think, oh, this is a religious podcast or about church. We're not going to talk about that. We will talk a little bit about church, but it's deeper than. So I did want to start, like, where are you first of all, let's just go back to the beginning.
Okay.
um, where are you from, and where were you raised? They might be two different places. Where are you from, and where were you raised?
I'm from LA and I was born and raised in LA. I was born on Sunset Boulevard,
Oh,
Kaiser,
wow.
and raised in half of Echo Park and the rest. I'm in Boyle Heights. For whoever doesn't know where Boyle Heights is right next to downtown LA. The bridge divides me
Hmm.
from downtown LA. Um, but
I
yeah,
had to I had to
I'm
drop some paperwork off to someone in Boyle Heights.
yeah.
I did it in the middle of the day. Let me just say that.
Look,
I made
look.
sure the sun was hot.
Yes, you have to. You have to.
Hmm.
It's the block is hot.
Facts. Yeah.
But I mean, I am looking to get out of Boyle Heights, but everything in its due time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm a 100% Angelino. I'm not enjoying the rain right now. I don't enjoy the cold. This is like, I don't even know how to function with an umbrella in my hands.
Hmm. I know. Yeah. People in LA don't know how to function. If it rains beyond like one afternoon, like it's been a couple days now, so
Yeah,
and it
I think it's
flooded.
third day. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
so
it's horrible.
see,
It's not for us. It's not for me.
spoken like a true Angelino. Oh, it's
Yeah.
horrible. It's been 2 days of rain. It's
I
horrible. The
I
world's coming
hate
to an end.
it. I can't wait for the
Yeah.
sun to come out.
Well,
No,
so growing up in LA has got to be a unique experience. I mean, everybody knows who listens to this that I'm not from LA. You can tell by my accent, I'm not from LA. Uh, so tell me about, and I guess, have you lived anywhere else, or have you lived in LA your entire life?
I haven't lived anywhere else. I've
Okay.
traveled to places, but I've never moved out of LA. So I
Got
went to school in LA, elementary, middle, high, went to Pasadena for college, and then
it.
Dominguez
Hmm.
Hills, which is in Carson, for anybody that knows where that's at, for um my bachelor's. And I traveled to Arizona to receive my master's, but I did an online program. So yeah, I have lived in LA my whole life. Like,
All
when I
right.
say
So
I'm a
for
true
frame,
Angelino, I mean
yeah, you are. Yeah. So frame
yeah.
of reference, you don't have much reference as it pertains to how was it to grow up in LA? Because that's all you know. But I do want to know a little bit, from someone who grew up in a very small town with less than 10,000 people, and there was one high school, one junior high school, one elementary school in my time in my town. Uh,
Mhm.
that's obviously very different than growing up in a city like LA. In LA, for people who don't know, if you can be in one part of LA and then drive 10 minutes and it feels like you're in a different world. Um,
Right.
so it really just depends on where at in LA you grew up. But what was your experience like growing up in LA and going to school in LA? And have you talked to friends who didn't grow up here and been able to kind of compare and contrast your experience to some of theirs?
Um, for me, for schools, and with the parenting style that my mom had, I was very sheltered.
Hmm.
Um, so I was very not like going out and figuring life out in LA. My mom wanted to make sure that I have an older brother, so
I
she
was gonna
wanted to
say
make sure
siblings.
that
So it's just you,
yeah, I have
you and
an
the
older
older brother.
brother.
Okay.
Yeah, we're 7 years apart, so that we also don't have too much in common. Um, but we were very sheltered. As for me, because well, in Hispanic culture, because you're a woman or you're a girl, you're even more sheltered than the boy, at least in my household. So I was not allowed to do a lot. So I was very, I don't want to use the word trapped, but trapped in my home. So after school, I
Mm,
was coming back home. So elementary school, obviously I'm still a kid. So dropped off, picked up by my dad. Middle school, I got sent to a charter school in Eagle Rock, which is maybe like 20-25 minutes from like downtown LA area side. Um,
yeah.
that was very like culture shock for me at that time as well.
Hmm.
Because there weren't a lot of like Latin people, like Hispanic or Black, or it was very um white, a very white charter school, and it was it was I either played the violin or I was in drama. So I played
Oh
the
wow, you played the
violin.
violin, huh?
I played the violin for 3 years.
Okay.
Um, so I did that there. We learned Latin instead of any other language. I wouldn't be able to tell you anything in Latin now. Um, so nothing stuck from that. And it was a one
Yeah.
building. It was 2 floors and it was one building.
Hmm.
Um, so I remember being angry because my homeschool at the time, I had already joined the drill team and I got pulled out of that. I got yanked out of it. And then high school came and I got sent to a magnet school because my homeschool is just, like at that time, even then, East LA Boyle Heights was even worse when it came to gangs and all the street life. Um, so because of my mom's background, she very much sheltered me. Um, I wasn't allowed to do anything. I was scared of my mom. I wasn't allowed to do anything
Mm.
really other
So wait,
than, I mean,
so you went to was it charter school? The charter school was to get you to keep you out of trouble. Is that why you got sent to a charter school, or because you
yeah,
got in trouble?
no, I never got in trouble.
Okay.
Keep me out of trouble. The
Hmm.
charter school was to keep me out of trouble because my homeschool again was very known for kids getting in trouble, gangs, all the things.
Yeah.
So I was kept out of trouble. My mom did everything she could to prevent me getting in trouble. High school, I did softball after school. And if I wasn't doing softball, then I was coming back home. School dances, I had to beg for them. Um, and I was getting
Been there.
dropped off and picked up at a specific time, no later. I wasn't doing like I did a mall hangout once without telling my mom that there were going to be boys around, and I never did it again. Let's just say that. because she
Yeah.
found out. She
So
would
let me
find out
ask you, so
everything. So
your parents were together, or were you raised in two separate households?
my parents were together. I still live with both of my parents, but they're not together. So I could go
Okay.
into that if you want, but
Yeah, well, of course.
yeah.
So you're
Okay.
saying currently you live with both of your parents?
I do.
Okay. Yeah,
Yes. So
no.
I live with
Yeah,
both
if
of my
you, I mean,
parents. So
let's go into that.
yeah, my parents have been together. They've stayed together up until maybe 3 years ago. But
Hmm.
they always had a very toxic relationship. It was always fighting and fixing, fighting and fixing, fighting and fixing. Um,
Yeah. Break up to
which
make up. That's like
yeah,
kind of the old adage, break up to make
yeah,
up.
which
Yeah.
that will lead into the discussion that we get into with the
How do you
father
know
of
what
my
discussion we're
child.
going to get into? How do
If
you
we
know what
get into
discussion we're
that,
going to
I
get
mean, it
into?
looks like we're gonna go
Okay.
deep. So,
Okay.
um, yeah, so they did that for my whole life.
Hmm.
And up until maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we're still under the same roof. But they sleep separately. They're in two different bedrooms. They're like roommates basically.
Oh
I
wow.
moved out for a while. I moved out for a while and I came back.
So this is the your childhood house.
For the most part, yeah. I moved here when I was
Okay.
like maybe 8, I think. I've been here for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And um and so your parents are just they're cordial. They how is it walking around in the house? Like how do they interact?
Um, there's good days and there's bad days. There's days where they're both in a good mood and there's days where you can cut the tension with a knife, really. Um,
Hmm.
so I pray a lot for God to soften both of their hearts because they both need it. Um, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of resentment there from both of them towards each other. Um, so when I could avoid being in kind of a one setting with them, I do that, which is obviously hard, but it's not impossible. So even like on weekends, I do separate things
Hmm.
to not have them together. Um, I've kind of taken responsibility over them. I can't remove myself from neither one of them. My dad was suicidal 2 years ago or a year ago.
Oh wow.
And I feel like he never really snapped back 100% after that. Um,
Hmm.
and my mom also has
Now,
like all of her other issues.
so your relationship with your father, like has he always been, kind of I don't know, suicidal, depressed? Or is it recent that he's been dealing with those issues?
Um, so that issue stemmed out of an argument that I had with the father of my child. It was very,
Okay.
very,
So
very, very
it
bad.
wasn't something it wasn't something that happened before
No,
while you were a
I had
kid,
never
like you
seen
never
him like
experienced
that.
that?
No.
Okay.
He was an alcoholic prior to me being born. But he went into Christianity and that saved him. Ever since he's been clean. Um, but he was not suicidal before. This stemmed off of the issue that we had in the household. And
Hmm.
he tried hanging himself. And he also that same day ran off to the highway. I was in Marina Del Rey or Hermosa Beach. I can't even remember what beach I was in, but my point is I was almost an hour and a half away from home. Um and luckily I had his location. I track both of my parents on their phone. Um so I was able to call someone and ask them to go look for him where he was, and he was in the middle of entering the highway. He was under a tree. So he came back from that.
Wow.
After that he was put into a mental hospital. Like the whole wristband, the whole ordeal. Like it was very strict to go visit. Um, so he wasn't sleeping. This happened because he wasn't sleeping. He didn't sleep for
Got it. Okay.
months and months and months and months and months. He just was having such a hard time sleeping, and doctors were not. I personally, I feel like there was not enough effort getting put into him to find the core issue as to why he was not sleeping. So he
Mm-hmm.
was just not nothing. Sleeping pills that were being given to him were not working. Um, and so he was fine for a little bit, and then I went off again. I left to San Diego a couple months later, and then I called my mom, and I could tell that she was not okay, and my dad had taken a bottle of pills. Um, so, and I think he didn't. That didn't take him out because he ended up throwing everything up. But when I
Mm.
got back home from my trip, I was gone for 2 days. It was the first time I left my daughter in 3 years. It was like a birthday trip, and when I got home, he was basically high because of the pills that he took. Um, after
Yeah.
that, after that, I told him basically like you either go check yourself into the mental hospital or I'm calling the cops on you. I had no choice. My daughter's in the house. Um,
Yeah. So
so
let's back up. Let's back up. Like
yeah.
kind of, you know, I say this all the time. I think it's in. First of all, I think it's extremely important that fathers be present in
Mhm.
their child's life. But being present physically is not the same as being present, if you know what I mean. Like you
Mhm.
can be in the house and not be relatable, not have any connections to the children. But I think it's important for fathers to be in their sons' lives for sure. But I think it's even more important for fathers to be present with their daughters because for me, I was raised by a single mom, which is why these stories, your story and other stories like yours, kind of stick out to me because I
Yeah.
understand from an existential standpoint as much as I can what it means to be a single mom. Obviously, I wasn't that, but I was a product of a single parent, and I
Right.
saw the toll that it took on her. And but for me as a boy, I had men around me, uncles, I had an older brother, I had pastors, I had coaches, I had teachers who could not only instill wisdom in me, but they could also discipline me. Right, so they could show me what it was like to be a man, And obviously, in my house, I had womanhood in my house, so I knew what it was like to be a woman. But for a lot of young girls, they understand womanhood, but they don't really understand manhood. And so a lot of times when the father is either physically absent or mentally absent, emotionally absent, it affects the choices as it pertains to the choices that those women make for their partners, their future partners. So I guess my question for you is, do you think that your relationship with your father had any influence on who you eventually chose to be with, to choose as a partner, and ultimately who became the father of your daughter? Do you think that any of that had an influence on that?
Um, that's tough for me because I feel like I'm still trying to figure that out because my dad was nothing like the person that I was with. My dad was very
Mm,
present mentally, emotionally, physically. He was not an absent father. Again, my parents had arguments, and I remember moments where my dad packed a plastic bag and left, but he was back in a day or two. Um, so I wouldn't say that my relationship with him was a reason why I chose the partner that I chose for 11 years.
mhm,
Um, I would say that the relationship that my parents had was the product of what I had. Because when I took myself out of the relationship, I kind of saw things a little bit more clear. After like going through the heartbreak process, I started seeing things differently. And I really saw more of like, oh, I was repeating my parents' cycle. But it took me having my daughter to
mm,
realize that because the moment that I asked my ex partner to leave, my daughter was in the room in that argument. And I feel like that was kind of like my light bulb where I told myself, I'm not putting my daughter through this because those conversations had been held with her father. I don't want to I don't want to give her what I have, and I don't want to give her what you have, which he had divorced parents. Um, so in my mind I was trying to break a cycle.
Okay.
But when I noticed that I was in the same cycle, it took my daughter being in the room with me in that argument for me to kind of just like, again, that light bulb. I'm repeating my parents' cycle. I saw this so many
Hmm.
times as a kid. I don't need my
And
daughter to see
when you say a
this.
parent cycle, you mean the cycle of arguments,
hmm
separating, getting
I
back
didn't,
together?
yes, I didn't see them ever get
Was there
physical with
abuse?
each
Okay.
other. Yeah, I didn't see my parents get physical with each other. They did have physical altercations prior to having me. Um, but I didn't see it. But I think like the arguments were so aggressive and so angry, um, that I feel like sometimes you don't need to see physical to even repeat. I mean, from my standpoint, like from my point of view, you don't need to see the physical
Hmm.
to then go through it because the
100%.
verbal, mental, and
100%.
emotional was so aggressive and so angry. That I remember, like, locking myself in the bathroom as a kid saying, like, "How can I run away?" Like, I know people
Oh,
make
wow.
jokes about it, but,
Yeah.
like, it's so real, like, it's so real, and I, like, vaguely, like, remember, like, thinking, like, "How can I get away from this? This is." But
Do you think it became consistent enough that you kinda, normalized it? 'Cause I think a lot of times, specifically in minority communities, we
Mhm.
normalize trauma. Even in
Yeah.
explaining it, sometimes we say, it wasn't that big of a deal. There was never any physical violence," or, "Yeah, my father was pretty absent. I mean, pretty present." But even that word, like pretty present or kind of present,
Mhm.
do you think that some of that trauma was normalized for you? Where it
From my
became kind of like,
parents?
yeah, it just became kind
Yeah,
of the normal
100%. It
thing,
was normal. It
Yeah.
was so normal. Oh my gosh, it was so normal that I did it.
Mm.
It was what I knew. I didn't know
Yeah,
anything
talk about that
else.
because that's kind of where I wanted to go. So, so that probably when you see something that's normal, even if it's from the outside looking in, to the average person, and be like, that is a crazy, traumatic situation to be in. But the person who's in it, if that's all they know, then it's hard. It becomes, to your point, it becomes a pattern because now
Mhm.
this is some weird form of comfort for you. It's
Yes.
comfort in the mess, and so like
Mhm.
you're comfortable with it. So then you try to find something that is comparable to that, even as crazy as it looks and sounds. It's like, but this is my norm. So let me find something that feels like home, fits my social
Mhm.
narrative that's been created. So do you think that that kind of led to, and then if you could, maybe tell me about the process of meeting your baby's father and how the relationship actually started.
Yeah, well, yes, it was made completely normal. Now when I compare myself where I'm at now and myself even just 3 years ago,
Hmm.
or even just a year ago, really, I realized like, how comfortable I was with chaos. Um,
Oh.
uh, it was just so normal. Like, being in a chaotic setting was normal, dealing with, um, even men that were still inconsistent with me after the breakup with my daughter's dad. That was still, like, fulfilling me in some way. I can't explain maybe in what way, but it was still chaotic enough to keep me in my norm, um, until up until a couple, I would say maybe months ago, that I really, like, started finding peace within myself and with the word of God, and wanting to, like, follow that.
Hmm.
Um, it's not until then that I've really, like, really have removed myself from the chaos, but, um I met her father when I was in college, my first year in college. Again, again, I was very restricted when I was a kid, so the first person I met coming out of college is kind of this person that I stuck to. Um,
I think that's not to cut you off, but that's a
yeah.
valid point. I know so many kids, and I don't have kids of my own yet, but I kind of theoretically try to check myself because I have the tendency to be overprotective and overbearing, even of my nieces and women in my life. But I've also seen the product of that when women are super protected and then they get out, and to your point, it's like, all right, this is freedom, and they do things because of the
Yeah.
restrictions, especially if that restriction
Yeah.
doesn't come from a pure place. It kind of, sometimes men and even,
Control.
parents put restrictions on kids because they're fearful, they're control, or they're fearful of whatever,
In
and
my
it
case, I
doesn't
think
come
a lot
from a
of it was
real,
control.
a place of love.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, yeah, for me, I feel like a lot
So
of
you
it
meet this
was,
guy in college.
yeah. I meet him in college.
Yeah. Mhm.
I don't want to deal with him at first until then, and then I'm like, okay, let's talk. So quickly turned into a relationship. Um, and soon after that, 6 months into our relationship, he played college football. So he went off
Mhm.
to North Carolina first and then Colorado. So we did long distance for almost 2 years. um and
I'm
it
allergic to
was
long distance.
yeah, well, I am now too. I've developed an allergy.
Yeah, yeah.
um I'll never do it again. But I did it, and I thought it worked. We thought we were making it work. But there was a lot of arguing in the thick of it. He would come back um whenever school was on break, and he would come and stay here. Um and when he was here, it was never not arguing. There was never no arguing. There
Mm.
was always an argument in the middle of what I thought was good. There was always an argument. I was getting accused of things that I wasn't doing. Um like manipulation, um lies. In the first month that he was gone for school, I had somebody calling me telling me that he had been cheating on me. She commented on my Instagram picture years ago. Um and he lied about it. He denied it. And from there, the trust issues began.
Now,
Um,
how long had you guys been in a relationship at that point?
at that point, maybe 6, 7 months.
And you both were still
So it was,
obviously in college. Yeah.
yeah, we were both still in college. We were both going towards our yes, towards our bachelors. But yeah, he would come back on breaks. He was actually living out of his car when I met him. He was showering in the school showers. So I
All right. So let me before let's just stop right there.
yeah.
uh
I'm just saying
Listen,
I had a lot of
obviously,
grace.
no. Obviously, grace is one thing, and God's grace is sufficient. But
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not God. You're not God, and no,
No,
we
I'm
should give
not.
grace. I want to kind of stop right here just for a second because I
Okay.
believe that men and women miss
Mhm.
red flags and real red flags.
Yeah.
Um, you know this, and I'm not saying, listen, people have, there are redemptive characteristics in some people who, you
Mhm.
go through hard times, you want people there for you, you want to be able, but someone has to have those redemptive qualifications or characteristics before you do that stuff. So can you speak to, maybe some red flags that you missed early on that you can maybe help some young women who may be listening to
Yeah.
this, who are meeting men for the first time? What are maybe three red flags that you missed? I would say probably living in his car, maybe when you met him, unless he had a plan. Because I've been there. I've
Um,
been in my car for
I
extended
think
period of time,
no,
but I had a
yeah.
plan.
But I think it's like being put into like he made sure he was a victim all the time. So
Okay,
just
so
being in victim
manipulative.
mode. Yeah. which turns into him manipulating, which he did up until like we were done with court for our daughter. Um, so that,
So from the
the
time you met him
gaslighting, there was a lot
to
of
from
down to something so minimal of, um, I said 2 p.m. No, you said 3 p.m. No, I'm sure I said 2 p.m. No, you said 3 p.m. Every time. If he knew he was not going to make it on time, he changed the time and he would tell me that he told me a different time. So I would feel like I was going crazy. It's like, how am I getting the time wrong every time? Um, so gaslighting, even in the most minimal ways.
Now look, I've got a relatively young following, but I got some people who are a little bit older that may not know what
Okay,
gaslighting is. That's a new
gaslighting
term. This is like a
is
millennial term. So gaslighting,
um so gaslighting. Basically, you like
I'll put a definition in the description if y'all need it. But
basically somebody telling to me is somebody telling me that I'm saying something incorrect when I'm right. So if I'm telling you I told you something and you're telling me I didn't tell you that, but I did tell you, it's somebody going
hmm,
back on their word. Somebody saying they didn't do something or didn't say something when they really did. So they're trying to make you believe that they
okay,
didn't. Does that make sense?
no, it makes sense. I was off base. I thought gaslighting was like kind of being facetious in your comments. So you say things that are make a person feel like puffing a person up, but you're not being genuine. Again, this is a millennial term. To me, it all boils down to manipulation. It's what it sounds like. You were in
Yeah,
a
it
relationship with
is.
someone who was a master manipulator.
100%. He was
And I think
master manipulator.
all of these things, the main red flag, in my estimation, for someone who's in a relationship with a partner is the moment you sense the spirit of manipulation, you should run for the hills or
100%.
confront
Run
it.
as fast as you
Confront it
can.
or confront
I
it.
would,
Let them know that you sense it. And then if they change, fine. But the moment
but
you sense it, your sensor should go up. Because
here's my thing about
some people,
change.
yeah, go ahead.
If I can, here's my thing about
Yeah,
change
sure.
and manipulators.
Yeah.
Somebody that is so good at manipulating is going to make you believe that they changed and they didn't change. I thought the father of my child changed for 2
Mm,
years. This is how good he was. For 2 years. My
mm,
daughter was planned. She was not like an oopsie accident baby. 3 months into my pregnancy, he reverted back to his old ways. Clockwork. There was no
mm.
pause, there was no in between. I'm 8 months pregnant. After our baby shower, I'm sleeping on the bathroom floor because he's so intoxicated that I don't wanna sleep next to him.
Well,
So somebody
let me say this. Let me say this. You're right that sometimes people can manipulate even
they
the
can change
change. They
without
can
you.
manipulate. They can manipulate or make it look like they're changing. But here's the reality. I believe you can want to change with all your might and all your power and all your strength, and it won't be enough because there are certain things that you alone cannot manage. You cannot change. You have to invite the spirit of God in you in order to
Yeah,
change because you can't do it under your own power. So it could be sometimes a person actually thinks to themselves, I'm going to change. I'm going to stop doing what I've been doing, but they try to do it under their own strength and under their own power, and it just doesn't work. The moment that something traumatic happens, they revert back to their own ways. You go back to the devil, like that old saying,
right.
like you just go back to what's comfortable. So I just kind of want to stop on that because I think it's important to really give some insight and wisdom when you see those red flags or that spirit of manipulation. Um, you've got two choices to make. To your point, you can either exit immediately or you can confront it and give them an ultimatum, but you cannot stay someone who's manipulated. There's just
Yeah,
no
my
no
advice
good end
is
to that.
to not stay. Um, I think if somebody wants to
Mm,
change, they have to do it without you. Is that something you have to do alone? I've changed a lot
okay.
in the last year,
I like
but
that.
I've put in work. Um, because
Hmm.
again, somebody can try to show you that they're changing while they're with you. And personally, now because of what I know and what I've lived, I'm scared I'm not going to know what the motive is. Are you trying to convince me that you changed? Are you really changing? Um, are you really doing this for yourself? No, you got to go change by yourself. If you're drawn back to each other after that, then maybe, but me personally, like now, and if I were to give anybody advice, it would be to let them go and don't turn back.
Mm.
I think that's just somebody that's not meant for you. Again, somebody can try to be showing you that they're that they're changing. Again, this person, and I'm speaking from my experience because I saw so much
Sure.
and
Yeah.
so in 11 years, this person was even
Uh
going to
huh.
church retreats.
So
Um,
let's go. Let's yeah. So I want we can talk all day, but I want to make sure I
yeah.
keep you in. I don't want to hold you too long. So let's fast forward to you said that he changed for a couple of years up until you were 3 months pregnant. From the time that he reverted back to his own ways or his old ways, can you tell me what that experience was like from that time? Because your daughter's how old, if you don't mind me asking?
She's going to be 4 in March.
Okay, so from the time you were 3 months pregnant to where we are now, can you kind of give me the Cliff Notes version of that process, that ordeal? Because obviously you're not with your baby's father right now.
Right.
Um, so from 3 months pregnant to having a 4-year-old daughter, what was that process like?
Um, it was being alone a lot.
Mm.
There was agreement that I would not spend pregnancy alone and motherhood alone. Um, but 3 months into my pregnancy, there was a lot of loneliness. I was alone most of my pregnancy. 3 months into my daughter being born, he was not around really. Um, I had
Were
surgery
you
on
all
my
still living
hand.
together?
Yes.
Okay.
Um, I had surgery on my hand and he went to work the next day. I couldn't even change my daughter's diapers. He said that there were plenty of hands in the household to help me change her diapers when she was really mine and his responsibility, not my parents. Um, it was very I don't know, it was very traumatic, I nursed her from my body, so I was pumping every 2 hours around the clock, so I was exhausted. And it was really a slap in the face of you made me believe that you were going to be somebody and a specific like a good father. Um and it was not none of that. My daughter was learning to crawl and he was walking steps over her, not minding her, not looking at her, would just walk right over her straight upstairs and come take a nap. Um he would be watching her and he would fall asleep watching her. So I couldn't even trust him with her. He was high all the time. um just come to the house high, leave high, be high. That was another thing that there was an agreement of letting go of the weed. But
So let
that
me
again,
let
3
me
months
ask you. Now, I
pregnant.
think
Yeah.
I skipped this, and I apologize for skipping this.
No, it's
But
okay.
you said you did notice the manipulation. You noticed he was sleeping in your car, but you guys planned this. So, like, what was it about him at the point where you planned the
So the 2
pregnancy that made
years
you
of
think?
convincing
Oh, the
me,
2 years of. Oh, got you. Okay.
it's the
Okay.
yeah, the 2 years of convincing me. There was a period of time where I focused on myself. We were together, I focused on myself. I had lost 50 pounds. I was thriving at my job, um, at my previous job. Um, and I was loving myself for the first time in a long time. And he noticed
Mm.
that. And I felt myself growing apart from him. And I told him, I don't know if I'm still in love with you. We had a planned trip to Belize at the time. And I told him, if we don't rekindle whatever we have had on our trip, when we come back home, you're packing your things and you're leaving. Um, on that trip, you know, things rekindled.
He did all
Um,
the things. He
he
did
did all
all
the
he did all the
things. He
right
did all the
stuff. Yeah.
things. From there, on. And then we go to the me being 3 months pregnant, and I start smelling weed on him again. And I'm asking him, "Are you smoking?" And he's saying no, but I'm smelling it. Um, so again, the lying, the manipulation, the again, the gaslighting. That's him. That was him gaslighting me. Me asking him, "Are you
Got it.
smoking?" And he's saying no, and I'm smelling it penetrated on his clothes. Um, so yeah, there was convincing for me to be like, okay, I think we're on the right track,
Yeah.
and I had at that time I had what 8, 9 years with him. So in my mind, I'm like, well, why am I going to throw away 9 years? If he's
Yeah.
getting it together for 2 years, it means that we're gonna be okay. um,
So what was the moment, you stepping over your daughter when she's crawling or trying to walk, not helping around the house, not helping raise the daughter at all. What was there a final kind of straw that broke the camel's back, or was it a combination of things? What was it that made you say, "All right, enough is enough"?
um, I was at work the day that I was at work. My mom found a backpack full of weed. um, and I called him and tried discussing it with
Mhm.
him. And he wanted to have no conversation about it. And I was trying to make him understand, like, hey, we have a kid in the household. If somebody calls CPS, that's our kid. It's our kid's life on the line. And I don't want to deal with CPS. I don't want to be questioned about anything, especially if I have nothing to do with it. Um, he didn't
For
even
people
want
who
to have a
don't know,
conversation.
CPS is Child Protective Services.
Yes.
For people who don't know.
Yeah. Thank you. um,
No problem.
he didn't want to deal with the conversation. His solution was that he was going to find his own apartment and do whatever he wanted to do out of it, and I would stay living here. So basically, nobody can tell him nothing. Um,
Mm.
Prior to that, I was already kind of like unengaged from him because he wasn't present, he wasn't here, so I was kind of uninterested in him. I didn't care to be next to him. I didn't care to anything with him. Um, but yeah, uh, I'm trying to have a conversation about this. He comes home one day. Um, he's trying to take me and our daughter on a boat ride. I don't care about the boat ride at the time. I'm trying to have a conversation about what the issue is. And and from there it blew up. It blew up into a big, 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 big argument. My mom called the cops. My dad had to remove our daughter from the bedroom because he was being
Mhm.
so loud. I later found out that my neighbors heard the whole argument. Um, and then my dad came back up and removed me from the room. He had already broken something in here, in my room.
Was there physical violence at this time?
In that last argument, he didn't get physical with me. He picked something up and broke it on the floor. So I guess you can say physical, just not direct. Um,
Yeah.
but my dad pulled me out of the room, and if my dad would have not pulled me out of the room, his fist would have been on my face. Um, so it took my dad getting me out. I made a comment about his mom, and it's like he saw red. It was the worst thing I could have told him. Um, and after that, I basically came back in and I told him, your things need to be packed up by the time that I get back, and you need to be out of here. And that was really the end of it. I never really went back after that. There was no going back. I tried to co-parent with him for 7 months. But then he threatened to
Yeah.
kill somebody. Um, and that's when I filed a restraining
To
order
kill you?
to kill somebody that I was dealing with.
Oh, you don't have to tell
That
me. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
mean, yeah, somebody that I was dealing with at the time. He found out. Don't know how he found out to this day. He said he was gonna put a bullet through their head. Um, and that's kind of when I had enough, and I went and filed a restraining order. Unfortunately, my case was not a heavy case because I never reported any of the physical, mental, and emotional abuse that he
Mm.
caused me. But I had enough evidence through text messages that he was an abusive person. I have a 10-page declaration, like, worth of abuse.
Yeah, I think
So
this is kind of worth this is a point kind of worth stopping on too. Like I'm not a specialist on domestic
yeah,
abuse at all, but I think it's worth mentioning to your point that if you are experiencing something that you don't ignore it, because
a hundred percent.
if it reaches that breaking point or that point where you actually need to go get some sort of law enforcement, they're
Mm-hmm.
going to want to see a pattern of this behavior. And if you haven't reported anything in the past, then it's going to be kind of hard to prove that this has been a history. So
Yeah.
I would just say, you don't never know what's going to happen in the future. You obviously don't want to get people in trouble that you love, but at a certain point, specifically if you got
And to
children,
that point,
you need to make sure that you put, yeah,
to the point of you saying you don't want
yeah,
to get, sorry, I cut you off, but to the point that
no, no,
you said you don't want to get people that you love in trouble,
hmm,
uh, down to like the day of that argument, my mom called the cops. And I remember I went downstairs and I snatched the phone out of her hand, very ignorant of me because my mom's obviously protecting me and my daughter. I pull the
yep,
phone out of her hands and I tell her, "What are you doing? This is the father of my child." And the cops show up and I say,
yeah,
"Nothing to
but
report
you know,
here."
and
I ask him to
and
pack his
and, and
things.
to that
If
point,
he comes back, I will then
yeah,
report. Um, so because of my
yeah,
ignorance at the time, I
and
never got
Carol,
that
and
report.
I just want to say, I just kind of want to say, and maybe you've already reconciled this with yourself, but women, that's what women do. Like, there's this protective nature, that nurturing nature that women have for people that you love, and sometimes at a fault to a deficit to yourself or detriment to yourself, you protect people around you. When again, it's
Mhm.
even detrimental to yourself. So it's not just. I don't want you to beat yourself up for it. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
you've healed from it, and I think that's the next point of our conversation is all this that's happened. Obviously, you went through the situation with your child's father. Now you've got a young daughter to raise by yourself. It's hard enough to be a single person in this city, but it's even harder to have another mouth to feed. I'm sure there was some sort of PTSD or some post traumatic stress that was associated with that relationship and all that you'd been through. So, and then you mentioned you didn't have any real relationship with God growing up. When you went to church, it
Right.
was kind of just because. How did you decide that you were going to try to start developing a relationship with God? Uh, was there a person, a thing that kind of drew you to God, or where did you start when you said, I want to have better for my life, but also want to have better for my daughter? What was that process like of getting to know God?
Yeah, so I actually had two people telling me to go to Oasis. But I was very against like wanting to get into religion. I was like, I don't want to be a
Mm,
Christian. I don't want to me at the time I'm like, I don't want to follow rules that are in a book. um so I did the crystals thing. I used to sage my room almost every day. um when I was going through my court case, I got so desperate that I dabbled into like witchcraft, not myself, but I paid somebody.
mm.
um
What did that look like? What do you mean when you say witchcraft? I mean, because there's all different forms. What does it look like? What did it look like for you?
I paid somebody to like do a spell thing and light candles
On
and like
you or somebody else?
on somebody else.
Oh wow.
um
Okay.
yeah, it got crazy. My mom was like, I don't think that's gonna work. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I need to try everything. I've tried everything. The father of my child won't leave my life. Keeps dragging me through court. He was dragging me through court. For 2 years, he dragged me through court. He made up lies. I had to do a DNA test on my daughter
Wait,
out of spite.
you try to put a spell on this dude?
Look.
Oh wow.
It got
I wish we
crazy.
had time to unpack that. Yeah, it sounds
it,
like it.
it got
It sounds like
crazy.
it.
Um,
Wow. Okay.
but I was manifesting, following just all the spiritual things. Until I realized like I'm miserable. I'm still miserable. I'm doing what people are talking about when it comes to crystals. Get this one, get that one, get that. This one's supposed to make you feel happy. This one's supposed to make somebody go away. Or
Hmm.
them leave you alone. Not go away, but them leave you alone. Um, and I was still miserable. I was so depressed. My anxiety was so severe, like so bad. Um, and my depression led me to like I parked in front of a bridge and I was like, I'm good. I'm gonna tap out. I'm tapping out. I can't do this anymore. I
Now, how
can't
old
do the
was your
poor thing
how old was your
anymore.
daughter at this time?
She was 3. She
Okay.
was 3 because this happened last year. She had just turned 3. Um, and it came from a lot of like my court case. The father of my child wanted to give up his rights to our daughter, and then he took it back, and then he wanted this, then he wanted that, then he wanted to drop his parental rights again. So there was a lot of he was controlling me through court in legal ways, and
Mm.
doing other things that were invasive, but legally invasive, so it wouldn't go against his restraining order. So he was still taunting me in a way, and being abusive in the ways that he could. So yeah, I go park next to a bridge and I'm like, I'm tapping out. I'm good. Like, I can't do this anymore. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I'm depressed. I'm not a good enough mother for my daughter.
Mm.
All the negative thoughts that could have overpowered me in that moment. And I just like hear a little voice that says, if you leave her to him.
Mm.
Because there was no legal paperwork that would leave her with people that were going to actually protect her. So by default, she was going to be left to him.
Yeah.
In that moment, I stayed in my car and I basically just cried it out. And I told myself, I got to get myself together. I got to keep fighting. I can't give up. I can't leave her. And I think the moment that I think that's the first time I heard the Holy Spirit talk to me. Like genuinely talk to
Wow.
me and me listening. Um and I think in action way, um I asked my daughter, I showed her a picture of her dad and I told her, "Do you know who this is?" And she said she didn't know. And I to this day and I will always say that that's an act of God because my daughter was at the age of her being able to remember who that was. She
Yeah.
should have
Yeah.
remembered who that was when I showed her that picture and she didn't. Um and that's when I told myself he's not coming back. God already took care of
Mm.
this. I just need to write it out. But
Yeah.
the week that I went to go park in front of a bridge, that's the week that I decided to go to church. I remember getting up on that
So
Sunday and
it was the week. So you did that after you decided to go to church, or
I did that
what was
before.
the
So
order of it
during
before?
the week I did that. And that Sunday came around. I didn't tell anybody I was going to church. I got up that Sunday. I checked the service times. I got ready and my daughter was already in my mom's room that morning. And I opened the door and I was like, "Hey, I need you to stay with her. I'm going to church. I'll be back." Um, and
What
she
did your
asked me,
mom
"Are you
say?
sure?" She said, "Are you sure?"
Mm.
She's like, "You don't have to." I'm like, "I have to. I have to."
Oh, this is the word right here, because
Yeah.
even the people that love you but don't understand what God is doing in your life
Yeah.
will sometimes, out of fear or misunderstanding,
Uh-huh.
try to deter you. And it's not from
Yeah.
a place of wanting worse or bad for you. It's just
No.
because they don't understand what God is doing in your life and they haven't heard from the Holy Spirit the way you've heard from the Holy Spirit. So it's why it's
Yeah.
tough to lean on people when you're hearing from God, because that's between you and God, and people just sometimes won't understand it. So I think
She
that's a
also didn't know what I went to she also didn't know what I at that
that's
time, now
true.
she knows,
Exactly.
but at the time, she didn't know, that I went and parked in front of a bridge. She didn't
Mm,
know that I had nights where I heavily drank, and
yeah.
because I wanted to be numb. I wanted to be numb. I didn't want to feel anything. I didn't want to remember anything. I had a plan. I had a family envisioned in my head.
Yeah.
Um, and I had things written out in my mind, like, okay, like we have a family, it's gonna be good. Um, and then I was traumatized basically. So much that I would tell when I was still with my daughter's dad, I would tell him, I don't want any more kids. And he didn't understand that that was stemming from what he had done to me. And for a long
Mm,
time, I've said,
hmm.
like, I don't want no more kids. And I've gotten now to my healing point with God and the word and, you know, just being happy where I'm open to the thought, maybe, and like I say, if it happens, it happens. If God has something written out for me, then that's what needs to happen. But before, you could catch me saying, No thanks, like it's a wrap. Like I have one and
Yeah. Yeah.
she's gonna, only child, she can get a dog, she can get a hamster or whatever. Um, but yeah, my mom didn't know I went to go park myself in front of a bridge. My dad didn't know. Um, I couldn't tell that to my dad after he had gone through suicidal stuff and had to go through a whole healing thing of being put on cocktail of medications. Um,
Yeah.
so
S-
I
So
told
what
my
was that
mom,
first experience like when you got to Oasis? What was that first Sunday like?
it was very overwhelming and of emotions. I was so overwhelmed in
Yeah.
emotions. Like I was sobbing like a child. Um, Literally like trying to not cry with noise.
Mm,
um, and somebody came up to me and they're like, "You're supposed to be here. You're in the right place." They prayed for me. 2 weeks later, him and his wife prayed for me. Um, but yeah, the first couple of weeks, I was just crying every Sunday, just overtaken by everything that I was trying to let go of. Also, like the anger, I was so angry.
yeah.
I was so
That's the
mad.
that's the cleansing of the Holy Spirit.
Yes, yes. I was so mad. Um,
Mm,
Maybe even slightly bitter. Like I had found out that the father of my child was cheating on me for 3 years. Um, and just just knowing things that I didn't know, things that came to light after I filed a restraining order were so hurtful. Um, because there was a lot of like, if you were cheating on me for 3 years, why didn't you just leave me? Why couldn't you just get up and go? Why did you choose to have a kid with me? You had an opportunity to not do so. But with that said, I needed my daughter to leave him. I needed her. And I think,
hmm.
I was so disobedient for so long. I didn't listen. I wasn't following God. I wasn't following the word. I wasn't, you know, trying to even hear it. And God always had me. He always had my back.
Always.
And he's like, okay, you're not gonna leave him. Well, I'm gonna give you a daughter. I'm gonna give you what you need to get up and go.
Mm, that's powerful.
Um,
Ooh.
and
Because then it becomes bigger than you,
yeah,
right?
oh
And I
yeah,
think until we have things that we live for that are bigger than us, it's hard to
yep,
navigate this world if you're only living for yourself.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And she is who I needed, and for 2 years I was fighting to protect her. And, I never neglected her dad from seeing her. I always said, you can see her, but it has to be supervised. Somebody needs to be watching over
Yeah.
you. And he didn't like that until he ended up giving up his rights. There was an agreement. I drop child support, you drop your rights. Um, but, God was in every step of the way, God was showing me that he was there for me. Um, Only that this time I was paying attention. I was paying attention to
Mm.
what God was doing for me. I dropped the child support, and a month after that, I got a raise at my job. Um, I found a daycare that I can afford. Literally, all within 2 months of me giving up. And it was all in
This
protection of
idea
my
that this
daughter.
idea, yeah, I mean, this idea that God's grace is made perfect in our weakness. People just don't
Yeah,
understand it. If your faith is not really faith, in my estimation, until it's tested, until you make
yeah,
a decision that only God can get you through. That
a hundred
you
percent.
have to be in a position where there's no way this is can be done unless something outside of my realm of control interjects itself and does something um, to usher this new season in. When did
Yeah.
you decide to bring your daughter to church?
It was Easter weekend.
And
That's when I first
you'd been
brought
going to
her.
Oasis for how long at this point?
I started going in March of last year.
Okay, so it was about a month before you brought your daughter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I got,
And
I'm trying to think of
what
timeline.
what was it that made
Yes.
you finally make that decision? I mean, I know you probably knew at some point. Obviously, I'm gonna have to
Um,
bring my daughter to church, but what was it that made you feel comfortable enough to say, "All right, now I need to introduce my daughter to this community"?
I wasn't breaking down hysterically after every service anymore.
Yeah, got it. Yeah,
I
that's
didn't
probably
want her,
helpful. Yeah.
she's seen me cry, and I've made emotions very normal to her. But there's like
Hmm.
a different kind of like breakdown that I think almost any parent doesn't want their kids to see them in. Um so basically I stopped breaking down after every service. Like a child that needed to be held, basically. That's what it was. That's how much
That's
I
what you
had.
were.
Yeah, that's what I was. That's literally what I
Hmm.
was. And yeah, I started bringing her. She loves it. She wakes up every morning. It's like, "Are we going to church?" I'm like, "No, baby, it's not Sunday. I wish it was, but
It's
it's
Monday.
not. It's Monday.
Yeah,
I've got to
yeah,
work and you've got to go to school."
yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, I knew that she's a reason I'm there. She's a reason that I am where I'm at now. Um, in flesh form, she's a reason. Obviously,
Mm.
God is a reason, but in flesh form, she's a reason. She is who God sent me. And I do, maybe I'm biased because she's my kid, but I just think she has such a big purpose in this world. Um, to just be great and just I don't
Yeah,
know, like I'm just so excited to see what she brings to this world because she is literally has been God's gift to me. Um and if it would have not been for her, then either I'd be either I'd be dead in the same relationship or still completely broken. There's like no in
mm.
between. All bad
Well, let me tell you
things. And
what.
now it's all
I
good
don't. I
things.
don't. I don't doubt that your daughter has a huge purpose in whatever she ends up doing. But I will tell you this, my friend. You also have a purpose attached to your life, and I'm also excited to see what that is and where it leads
Thank
you.
you.
You're for someone who's just now developing, and this is another thing that I think is important. Whether you go to church every Sunday, you belong to a church, when you press into God, God will show you things that you had no idea you could accomplish. I'm pretty sure that if you asked yourself 2 years ago, would you be involved in church? Would you be in a leadership role? You'd be like, what? How's that going to happen?
100%.
Like, how's that even possible?
Well, like,
And
no way.
now, and now you've not even been in church really a year, and you're already super involved leadership roles. And again, this is not necessarily about being in church, but you're
Right.
starting to affect people's lives, and you can do that in church, outside of church, at your job. Um, and so I'm excited to see what God has for you, as well as what God has for your daughter. I kind of want to
Thank you.
tie a bow on it with this, and I really appreciate your time. We went way over
Yeah, of
what I
course.
told you we
No,
were
it's
going to go, but that's
okay.
because, and we could literally talk for another 2 hours. But
Yeah.
uh, I do want to kind of give the listeners a few nuggets to walk away with, and I think we did with the red flags and things to look for in relationships. But also, if you had to give them something that they could lean on when they're in a place of darkness and maybe they don't have a daughter or they don't have a higher calling that they're aware of that deters them, is there anything that you could maybe tell them to do before they get to that point? Um, any advice that you would give someone who's considering ending it all, because they feel like they're in a situation that they just can't get through or get out of? Um, any words of wisdom?
Yeah, I think, this might be something that people have heard, but really, like, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Things do get better, but we have to also put in the work and the time for it to get better. Um,
Mm,
it's not just going to happen. You have to put in work. It takes internal, mental, emotional work. Um, and God just has a plan for all of us. For me, downloading the Bible before even stepping into a church, I was buying crystals, reading the Bible on my phone. Um, so just even downloading the app on your phone and just getting those daily, Bible verses to me helped me a lot.
yeah.
When I went to go park at that bridge, I already had the app on my phone.
Mm,
So I think God was allowing me already to be tapped in with him. Um, but really, like, it gets better. If and we should always save ourselves for ourselves. Like you said, somebody who doesn't have a
oh,
kid,
say
or,
that. Say that
you
again.
know,
Say that
we
again.
have we have to live for ourselves, save ourselves for ourselves.
Save
You can't,
ourselves for ourselves. I love that.
yeah, you know, um,
Yeah.
because if I wasn't doing it for myself as well, what good would it be for my daughter? What am I then teaching her?
Mm,
Um,
yep.
I have to teach her, she comes first. She just got to do things for herself. She's got to love herself, respect herself, all the things. Um,
But you
so
can't
make sure that,
pour. You can't pour from an
no,
empty vase.
I've tried, and you cannot do
Yeah.
that. You can't. You've
Yeah.
got to, and I think, like, my fire for Jesus, like, I feel like that's what fills me up every day. Even just
Mm,
take 20-30 minutes to dedicate to yourself and be very intentional with that time. No distractions. Um, we get very distracted with what's around us. There's so much around us,
100%.
um, that
Yeah.
we feed into. So it's important to not feed into those things. Also, it's very important to understand and realize what you're consuming daily when it comes to what you're
Hmm.
looking at on your phone. That's a big big thing too, that I not so long ago have made sure to make very intentional. Anything on social media that does not feed my purpose, I don't want it.
That's right. Yeah. Where your
So,
attention goes, energy flows. And like when you were saying back to the point where you're talking about witchcraft and trying to put a curse on somebody. If your energy is there, if you're thinking negatively towards somebody else, it's like, this old saying that being angry or hating someone is like drinking poison and expecting that person to die.
Yeah.
And that's real life. Like when you put
Yeah.
that energy out there in the atmosphere where you're wanting something bad to hurt someone who's done something hurtful to you, because I've been there, trust me, I've been there.
Yeah.
And I still have those moments, but um, God is inside. And all this, I think a lot of times some people get tied up or you know, on this idea of, I don't really want to go to church. I'm not really religious, or I don't know what that means. And it's like, we start with figuring out who you are, because I promise you, the more you get to know yourself, the more you will find that God is inside of you. And if you
Mm-hmm.
can just push into that still small voice that's telling you to do certain things and trust it, like really trust what that voice is telling you. We call it our inner voice.
Mm-hmm.
It's not ours. That inner voice is
Right.
from the being, the entity that created us, that is still inside, talking to us
Right.
through us, imploring us to do something. The voice of God doesn't come from outside in; it comes from inside out.
Right.
Well, look, like I said, I could talk to you for a couple hours, but I'm glad you took the time to spend with me and be super transparent, way more
Of
transparent than I thought.
course. Look,
Um,
anytime.
yeah, yeah, and I say this, I always leave my audience with this, because I truly believe this, that for this time, if we choose it to be so, we will be the very best of God. It's 100% up to us. So I wish that for you. I can't wait to see all the
Thanks.
things you're gonna do, and also, your daughter. So, and I'm looking forward to doing some stuff with you. We got some things coming up that we're working on. So,
There we go.
the Bible study is starting soon. So,
Yeah.
we'll be working
I'm
together
excited
on some
about that.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I appreciate you, and I
You're
appreciate everyone
welcome.
who's listening. Y'all, stay tuned. Check her out. Give me your Instagram if you want to give them to. I mean, maybe you don't. Maybe you don't want people to
Yeah,
check
I
you
mean,
out, but
I'm Carol Smize 92. I made it up when I
okay.
first joined Instagram.
All right.
So
I'll
cliche.
put it in the I'll put it in the description, so if they want to follow you, they can
Okay.
check you out.
Yeah.
All right. All
Thank
right. Well, you have a
you.
good night. We'll talk
You
soon.
too. Thanks. All
All
right.
right. Take care.
Bye.
That's a wrap for this episode, pun intended. I want to thank you for joining us. We hope that you learned something about yourself. Hopefully you heard something that you had otherwise never thought of in that way. We welcome your comments. Please share, subscribe, talk about this with your friends. Our goal is to talk next time about something that you want to hear specifically. So comment, message us, email us. Let us know what you want to hear, what you want us to talk about, what you thought about this episode. And we'll catch you next time. That'll be good.